Welcome to Lesson 2 for Writing Equations of Lines. There are two primary forms you can write a linear equation. In slope-intercept form, which is y equals mx plus b, and point-slope form, which is y minus y1 equals m times the quantity x minus x1. But before we use these two equations, we need to know the slope formula. The slope formula is m equals the rise over the run, which is basically the change in y over the change in x. Or in other words, y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. The slope-intercept form, which is y equals mx plus b. M represents the slope and B represents the y-intercept. You must know the slope and y-intercept to write in this form. Use algebra to turn point-slope form into this form. Point-slope form, which is y minus y1 equals m times the quantity x minus x1. M represents the slope and x sub 1, y sub 1 represents a point on the line. You must know a slope and a point on the line to write in this form. It's in the name. Point-slope form. Again, you need a point and a slope to write in this form. Writing equations given a graph. Number 1. Write the equation of the graph line in slope-intercept form. Now remember, slope-intercept form is y equals mx plus b. So the first thing that I need to do is figure out our y-intercept. Now the y-intercept is where the line crosses the y-axis. It crosses at 0, 2. So therefore, b is 2. So now that I found what b is, let's figure out what the slope is. So the slope is essentially our rise over the run. So looking at our graph, I'm going to look at 2 points. Here's my first point. Here's my second point. So it seems like I need to go down 2. So that's going to be represented as -2. And then I'm going to run 5. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So what's our slope? Again, it's our rise over run. Our slope is going to be -2 over 5. So now I figured out my b and my m. I can go ahead and plug them in to the slope-intercept form. So it's going to be y equals -2 over 5 x plus 2, and this is the equation of that particular line. Number 2, I have my line. I need to figure out my y-intercept. The y-intercept, once again, is where the line crosses the y-axis. It crosses at 0, 3. So b is going to be 3. And my slope, well, I need to look at the 2 points. Here's a point. Here's another point. I'm going to go up 3, so it's +3. Then I'm going to go and run to the right 4. So my slope is 3 over 4. My rise is 3 and my run is 4. So using my slope-intercept form, I have y equals 3 over 4x plus 3. And that is my answer. You can always decide how to start writing the equation of a line based on the information you're given. Slope and y-intercept, slope and point, or 2 points. The name of the form or the formula tells you the information you need to know to write that form. Writing equations of lines given different information. Use the given information to write the equation of a line in slope-intercept form. Number 1, we have m equals -3 and b is equal to -6. Remember, m means slope and b represents the y-intercept. So I have a slope and a y-intercept that means I'm going to be using the slope-intercept form, y equals mx plus b. So I'm going to write y equals mx plus b, and I'm going to replace m with -3 and b with -6. So I have y equals -3x plus -6. Then I'm going to simplify, so I have y equals -3x. Then I have that plus times a negative, which is going to become a negative, so -3x minus 6. And this is my answer for number 1. For number 2, I have a slope of 1/2, and it passes through the point -4, 3. So that means I have a slope and a point. So that means I'm going to be using point slope form. So when I'm replacing the variables in point slope form, I'm only replacing the y sub 1, the m, and the x sub 1. Do not touch y and x. So let's write our point slope form, which is y minus y1 equals m times the quantity x minus x1. Again, I need to replace the y sub 1, the slope, and x sub 1. This -4, 3 is my point, so I'm going to say that -4 is x sub 1, and 3 is y sub 1. So I have y minus y1, which is 3, equals m, which is 1/2, times the quantity x minus -4, because x sub 1 is -4. Alright, so I have y minus 3, which is equal to 1/2. Now I'm going to look inside of the parentheses here. I have a negative times a negative, which becomes a positive. So I have 1/2 times the quantity x plus 4. So now what I need to do is turn this into y equals mx plus b, because that's the equation of the line. So here's this 1/2. I need to distribute the 1/2 to each term inside of the parentheses. So 1/2 times x is just 1/2 x. And then 1/2 times 4 is basically saying 1/2 of 4. And 1/2 of 4 is just positive 2. So then on the left-hand side, I'm just going to rewrite y minus 3. Okay, so again, I need to get this into y equals mx plus b. So in other words, I need to get y by itself. I have y minus 3, so I need to add both sides by 3 here to get y by itself. So it's y equals 1/2 x plus 2 plus 3, which is 5. And this is my answer. Number 3, we have a line that passes through the points 4, -6 and -3, 8. So what do we use here? Do we use slope-intercept form or point-slope form? Well, this one's a little tricky here. We only have 2 points, but these 2 points are still part of this line, right? So what I can do here is use those 2 points and plug them in to my slope formula. The slope formula is m equals y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. So these 2 points are in the form x comma y, right? So we have an x here and an x there, and I have a y here and a y here. But I need to differentiate them. So this will be my first point, and this will be my second point. Since this is my first point, I'm going to call this x, x sub 1. Or in other words, I'm going to call 4 x sub 1. So if this is x sub 1, and negative 6 is part of the first point, then this is going to be my y1. So we have x sub 1, y sub 1, and this is going to be my x sub 2, y sub 2, because this is my second point. Okay, great. So now I'm going to go ahead and use my slope formula. So it's m equals y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. So m equals 8 minus negative 6 all over negative 3 minus 4. So 8 minus negative 6 becomes an 8 plus 6, because a negative times a negative is a positive. So 8 plus 6 is 14, all over negative 3 minus 4. I'm going to start negative and add more negative to the negative 3, so that's going to become negative 7. So 14 over negative 7, if I divide, that's going to become negative 2. My slope is negative 2. So I have my slope and these 2 points here. What do I use to get to the equation of the line? Do I use slope-intercept form or do I use point-slope form? Well, again, I have a slope in these 2 points, so it looks like I gotta use point-slope form, which is y minus y1 equals m times the quantity x minus x1. Okay. Well, you don't necessarily need to have 2 points. I only need 1. I have 4 comma negative 6 and negative 3 comma 8. Which one do I choose? Well, it doesn't really matter which one you choose. You'll get the same answer no matter what. So let me go ahead and pick this point instead of this point. So again, I have my point and my slope. I gotta replace the x sub 1, I gotta replace the y sub 1, and I definitely need to replace the slope itself. So let's go ahead and do that. I have y minus negative 6, which is equal to my slope, which is negative 2, times the quantity x minus 4. Y minus negative 6 becomes y plus 6, which is equal to negative 2 times the quantity x minus 4. I'm going to use the distributive property here, so the negative 2 times x becomes negative 2x. And I have negative 2 times negative 4. Negative times a negative becomes a positive, so negative 2 times negative 4 is positive 8, or plus 8. Now here I need to get y by itself, so let's go ahead and subtract both sides by 6. So I have y equals negative 2x plus 2, because positive 8 minus 6 is plus 2, or positive 2. And this is my answer. Number 4, you have a line that passes through the x-intercept of 5 and y-intercept of 3. Remember, x-intercept means you have a line that crosses the x-axis, and y-intercept means that you have a line that crosses the y-axis. So x-intercept of 5, that can be represented as 5 comma 0. And the y-intercept of 3, that just means 0 comma 3. Now, I need to figure out the equation of the line, y equals mx plus b. So what do I really need to do? the first thing that you have to do is just figure out the slope. Remember, the slope formula is m equals y sub 2 minus y sub 1 all over x sub 2 minus x sub 1. This is my first point, and this is my second point, 5, 0. So 5 is going to be x sub 1, and 0 is going to be y sub 1. 0, 3, again, that's my second point. So 0 is going to be my x sub 2, and 3 will be my y sub 2. So then plugging everything in, I have 3 minus 0, y sub 2 minus y sub 1, all over my x sub 2 minus x sub 1, 0 minus 5. 3 minus 0 is 3, 0 minus 5 is negative 5. So my slope is negative 3 over 5. Now, we can easily use the point slope form if we wanted to, but we actually do have a slope and a y-intercept. So I don't necessarily need to use the point slope form, but if you want to, it will take some time. So what's the equation of the line, or what's the slope-intercept form? Y equals mx plus b. So your answer should be y equals negative 3 over 5x, and the y-intercept is 3, so you're going to put plus 3 here. And this is your answer. Next, you can write the equation of parallel and perpendicular lines in a similar way as previous examples. You just need to remember how slope relates to parallel and perpendicular lines. Parallel. Parallel lines do not cross, and parallel lines have equal slopes. For instance, if I have two lines that are parallel to each other, they look something like this. They, again, do not cross, and they both have the same slopes. So if I said I have a line that has a slope of 1/3, well, the line parallel to that original line should have the same slope as well. So again, this is my original slope. What's the slope that's parallel? Well, that's going to become 1/3 as well. With perpendicular lines will cross at a 90-degree angle. Perpendicular lines have opposite reciprocal slopes, aka change the sign and flip. So let's say that you have one line that is perpendicular to another line. If these two lines are perpendicular to each other, that means that they intersect at a 90-degree angle. So, let's say that I have this slope here. And that slope is going to be m equals negative 2/3. Well, what's the perpendicular slope for this line over here? Well, I'm going to write m perpendicular, which is equal to, well, what's the process here? You need to use opposite reciprocal slopes, which means you need to change the sign and then flip the fraction. Originally, we have a negative sign, so we got to change the sign. The perpendicular slope becomes a positive this time. And then my original slope has a fraction of 2/3. So we gotta flip the fraction where the 2 becomes the denominator and 3 becomes the numerator. So you have positive 3/2 as your perpendicular slope. Because again, all you have to do here is you change the sign and you're gonna flip the fraction. Let's go ahead and write equations of parallel and perpendicular lines. Number 1. There is a line that passes through the point 4, negative 5 and is parallel to another line, which is y equals 1/2 x plus 5. So let me go ahead and write all of this down. We have a line, we'll call that line 1, that passes through 4 comma negative 5. And we can go ahead and just draw a rough sketch of what that looks like. So here's my line, and it contains the point 4 comma negative 5. And then we have this line, which is parallel to another line. And parallel, the symbol that we use, parallel, looks like forward slashes. So we have a line 2 over here, which is in the form y equals 1/2 x plus 5, which I am going to illustrate right next to the blue line. So y equals 1/2 x plus 5. So we know that the key word here is parallel, so these two lines should have the same slope. So what's the slope? Well, the slope is already given. We can look at this equation here, y equals 1/2 x plus 5. The slope is 1/2. So I'm going to write that down. The slope is 1/2. And I can see that I have a point here and a slope there. So in order for me to write my equation of this line, I gotta use point slope form, which is y minus y1, which is equal to m times the quantity x minus x1. So it's y minus, well, let me go ahead and label this point. This is going to be x sub 1, y sub 1. So it's y minus negative 5, which is equal to my slope 1/2 times x minus 4. So y minus negative 5 becomes y plus 5, and that's still going to be equal to 1/2, or I should say, if I'm looking at this 1/2 in the parentheses here, I'm going to distribute, so I should have 1/2 x minus 2. Okay, so 1/2 times x is 1/2 x, and 1/2 times negative 4 is just negative 2. So we're going to solve for y now. We need to subtract both sides by 5 here. So y equals 1/2 x minus 7, and this is my answer. Number 2, we have a line, which we'll call line 1, that contains the point negative 4 comma 4 and is perpendicular, so we're going to use this symbol for perpendicular, to another line, which we'll call line 2, that is in the form y equals negative 4x minus 2. So line 1, we're going to use blue, and we're going to draw a rough sketch again, like we did before. This line contains the point negative 4 comma 4, again that's line 1, and it is perpendicular to line 2, which is y equals negative 4x minus 2. So I'm going to go ahead and draw what that looks like. And that line, again, is y equals negative 4x minus 2. And these two lines are perpendicular to each other, so they intersect at a 90-degree angle. All right? Okay, so now I need to figure out the slope. Well, we have y equals negative 4x minus 2. Negative 4 is the slope of that particular line. However, the key word here is perpendicular, which means you're going to change the sign and flip the fraction. Well, if m is equal to negative 4, I can go ahead and rewrite that as negative 4 over 1. The perpendicular slope, however, again, you need to change the sign and flip the fraction. Well, the original has a negative, so the perpendicular slope should be positive. And now I'm going to go ahead and just swap the places of these two numbers here. So you're going to have positive 1 over 4. That's your perpendicular slope. So I'm going to use the perpendicular slope and this point here. So we're going to be using point slope form. Y minus y1 equals m times the quantity x minus x1. So this will be x1 and this will be y1. So I have y minus 4, which is equal to 1 over 4 times the quantity x minus negative 4. So I have y minus 4 equals 1 over 4 times x plus 4. So I'm going to use the distributive property now, and I get y minus 4, which is equal to 1 over 4 times x is 1/4 x, plus 1 over 4 times 4, which is basically saying 1/4 of 4, which is just positive 1. Or if you would like, you can just say 4 divided by 4. Now what I need to do here is get y by itself, so I'm going to add both sides by 4 here, and I get y equals 1 over 4x plus 5. And that is the equation of that line. Okay, so now what I want to go ahead and do is discuss horizontal and vertical line equations. The equation of a horizontal line is y equals b, and b is what we call the y-intercept of the line. And horizontal lines look like this. It's a straight line that just go left and right at the same time. So if I'm looking at the picture here, I have a horizontal line where it intersects the y-axis. This is the y-axis, by the way. This line intersects the y-axis at this particular point, which is 0, negative 3. So how do I write that equation? Well, again, it's y equals b, where b is the y-intercept of the line. So therefore, this is y equals negative 3. That's the equation of this horizontal line. And by the way, that line here has a slope of what? Well, it has a slope of 0. So if it has a slope of 0, of course you're going to have a line that's going to be horizontal. So y is equal to negative 3. Now the equation of a vertical line is x equals a, where a is the x-intercept of the line. Now before I look at the picture over here, remember a vertical line looks like this. It goes up and down. It's a straight line that goes up and down. So let's take a look at the picture to the right here. This is our vertical line. And the equation is always in the form x equals. So it's x equals the x-intercept. So this is the x-axis, this is the x-axis, and the line touches the x-axis at this particular point, which is negative 2, 0. So it's going to be x equals negative 2. That's the equation of this line with a slope that's undefined. So when you have a line that goes up and down, you have a slope that's undefined, where you have a number in the numerator and 0 in the denominator. So The answer to that is x equals -2. Now let's write the equation of the line with the given information. Number 1, you have a slope that's 0, and it passes through the point 4, 2. Now, if m is equal to 0, that implies that we have a 0 slope. Okay, so let me go ahead and just draw a picture of what everything looks like. So first of all, you need to have our x and y plane. So this is the x-axis, and that's the y-axis. And we have a point 4, 2, which is located over here. All right, 4, 2. Well, if the slope is 0, then you're supposed to have a horizontal line, just like this one over here. So it should go through that point 4, 2, should be a horizontal line just like so. So what's the equation here? Well, if you have a 0 slope, it should be y equals. So it's y equals the y-intercept. So if this is 4, 2, then what is this point over here? Well, that should be 0, 2. This point is 0, 2, which is our y-intercept. So y equals 2. Number 2, you have a slope that's undefined, and it passes through the points -1, 5. I'm going to go ahead and illustrate with a picture. So I'm going to draw my x and y plane. So -1, 5 should be located right over here. And an undefined slope is a vertical line, just like this one over here. So it passes through -1, 5, and again, the slope is undefined. So it should look just like this. Okay, so if you have a slope that's undefined and you're asked to write the equation, it's always in the form x equals. So x equals the x-intercept. So where does the line touch the x-axis? Well, at this particular point over here. So what is that point? Well, if this is -1, 5, then this has to be -1, 0. So x equals -1.